Hi, my name is Chris Jones. I am the Managing Director at PSE Consulting. Welcome to our Payments Innovation Series. Today, I'm very glad to be joined by Yas from Codat. Hi, Yas.
Hi, Chris.
So today, we're going to be talking about how acquirers in particular, but other businesses as well, can utilize open finance to onboard their customers. So perhaps, yes, it'd be interesting to start by hearing your views on some of the challenges that acquirers have and other participants in the financial services world when they're onboarding clients.
One of the biggest issues when you're being onboarded to a service, particularly from an acquirer's perspective, is the fact that you don't necessarily have all of the data to hand that you have to share. And any data that you do have to share has to be done manually. So it's bad for user experience, and there are often gaps in the data because you're kind of taking, as a merchant, you're taking a guess at what that merchant acquirer actually wants from you. So often you find that the acquirer ends up reaching back out to you as a merchant, and there is lots of back and forth between yourself and the acquirer, which can often be frustrating for the merchant.
Sounds great. So, obviously Codat has identified this as a problem, and what's your solution to actually solving this?
Sure. So I think one of the major issues is actually around the data itself, and the fact that there is that bad user experience. We really think, what is the ultimate problem beyond just the user experience? It's actually that what these credit analysts are doing, who are in these acquirers, often are using credit bureaus, and credit bureaus have been kind of great in the past, but actually the fact of the matter is the credit bureaus often have data that is completely out of date, and it actually means that they can't rely on that data. So from Codat's perspective, one of the main things that we're doing is making sure that we can provide a real-time snapshot of that small business's data so that that acquirer can feel more comfortable about the risk appetite that they're giving to that merchant ultimately.
So yes, maybe you could give us a little bit of background on Codat and maybe how you came about this is a problem that you'd like to address.
Sure. So my background has actually been in payments to date. So when I joined Codat, it was a little bit of a newer world because it was about SME data. But one of the things I knew was a problem in the payment sector was the fact that the onboarding process and also just how credit risk works was a little bit broken because of the fact around the credit bureaus and kind of what they're using as a source of data. So at Codat, one of the main things that we do is integrate into small businesses' financial software on behalf of our clients. And our clients in this case would be the acquirers. So what that means is that instead of the acquirers having to do those integrations into those pieces of software, for example, maybe your accounting or your commerce provider, Codat takes that heavy lifting away from you as an acquirer. And what you would do as an acquirer is you would come to Codat. It's entirely white labeled. So what that would look like is as part of your onboarding process, you give your merchants the opportunity to share their financial data automatically. And that removes the bad user experience that we were talking about. It removes the need for the merchant to provide anything manually. And ultimately, you get that data in real time. So both sides are winning in that experience.
So perhaps you could share the actual user experience that a small merchant would have if they were to go to an acquirer to sign up for their services and that acquirer were using Codat.
Sure. So essentially what it looks like is you would never see Codat's brand. As I mentioned, it's entirely white labeled. So what the acquirer can do is completely embed Codat's link product in their onboarding journey and entirely have that branded as their brand. And I've got an example shown up on here. So this one has the Codat brand on because we don't have an acquirer example that we're necessarily working to. But essentially what would happen is as I sign up for an acquirer's services, I would be asked to input a bunch of data, which is just standard procedure, what my business name is, my email, that sort of stuff. And then when I get taken through to the next screen, it would ask me to link my accounts, and that would prevent the acquirer from having to ask that at a later date. So I then go to this next screen. The acquirer's logo would appear up here where it currently says Codat. That is just a placeholder. And essentially what Codat is giving the acquirer the option to do is enable their merchants to share their accounting data, enable their merchants to share their commerce data, which would be an e-commerce platform or a point of sale system, or data directly from their bank account. You can do this, you can do all three of those sources You can get the data from all three of those sources from your merchants, or you can just choose to have one. It depends on the data points that you care about as an acquirer. So from the accounting side, you get a very rich picture of what that entire business's accounts look like. So that would be how they're paying their suppliers, how their customers are paying them, how they do their bookkeeping, that sort of data. Essentially, any time an acquirer would ask for data manually from a merchant, they'd essentially be asking for their management accounts, and they can get that by a company's house or from a credit bureau. But again, you have the issue of it being out of date. So if you ask the merchant to link their accounting data in real time, you're getting all of that data from that moment. And then you can assess the merchant's accounting activity in the past and up to the point of today when they've decided to sign up to your service. Now, from a commerce perspective, this is arguably one of the most valuable sources as an acquirer, because the data is very similar and the process is ultimately the same. You both be dealing with payments. From a commerce perspective, the data is mainly focused on what the sales profile looks like from that merchant. And ultimately, you get excellent insight into how that merchant is treating, well, not necessarily treating, but you get excellent insight into how that merchant is dealing with their other commerce providers. Because on average, merchants deal with more than 9 commerce payments providers, because they want that optionality in terms of how their customers pay them. So getting insight into that commerce data is super valuable. You get to see things like chargebacks, but we can discuss that more in a moment. And then from a banking perspective, you get a real-time view of what that banking activity is. So even up to the point of yesterday, if you can get a merchant to sign up all of their key software systems, the accounting, banking, and commerce systems, you're getting a full picture of that SME's financial profile, which you just wouldn't get if you were dealing with manual documents. It would require way too much back and forth. So for the demo, I'll show you just a quick example of what it looks like from a user journey perspective for the small business. So let's just say I'm a small business and I'm using Xero and I'm signing up to this acquirer service. What I would do is I would select my accounting software. I'm just going to use Xero as this example. Click next. And then I'd be taken to a screen that's entirely customizable by the acquirer that essentially tells me what data is going to be pulled from my Xero account. So it's really giving that transparency around the data sharing that the merchant is about to do, which is super important for the merchants because they don't just want to be giving away their data. Then essentially, if I agree with that as a small business, I would get taken to my Xero login screen. And then I'd select login and the data would be automatically pulled into my system.
So you shared in that demo the merchant providing their details to the acquirer. Why is it that merchants would want to do that, and what is it that they get back in return?
So a really key point about when you're as a merchant and you're looking for an acquirer's services is that lots of the acquirers actually, because they don't have the data up front when they're onboarding you, they do things like increase holding periods of how long they keep your funds for when you are using their services. And merchants, ultimately, that's really bad for them, right? Because that affects their cash flow. So one side of it is actually, if you give your data, you can do things like reduce your holding period, therefore get access to the funds that are essentially yours quicker. And that reduces my risk as an acquirer because I have the data. So that's one side of it. The other side of it is actually, if you're automatically extracting data from the small business's accounting software, then essentially you're saying to the small business that you don't need to do anything manual, which saves them time and is obviously a very big perk for them. So that's another side of it. And the third point, with an ongoing connection to the accounting software, using the accounting software as the example here, is that you can offer auto reconciliation to your merchants. And essentially what you're saying to them when you offer that auto reconciliation is that you're removing the need for them to have to do that manually. Again, translating to saving them time. And they're more likely to use your services as an acquirer if they can get all of those integrations out of the box and you can offer that ongoing connection.
So it sounds a very attractive set of benefits for merchants, but perhaps you could give us some of your views on some of the concerns and challenges that may come about with merchants being unsure about whether they should share this information.
Yeah, so particularly from that perspective, we do get questions about, are merchants willing to share the data? one of the key points we convey to clients, and the same for acquirers, would be that you really need to convey why the merchant should share their data. The fact, so from my example that I gave earlier about holding periods, you get access to funds faster if we have more data on you. That would be a perfect example if you are being onboarded onto an acquirer, the types of advantages I would want to see right off the bat as I'm sharing my data.
Sounds great. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Yas, and for all your interesting insights.
Thanks very much, Chris.